Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. I recently saw a link to this old article on Twitter Diapsalma had somehow managed to find an old article by Kamshia Hearthstone creating the Discover mechanic, how the idea of treasure became the League of Explorers' mark new mechanic. So this is an interview with Ben Brode and Dean Ayala from 2016, so 6 years ago, and I just found this to be fascinating because it really, in some ways, it really showcases how the design philosophy of Hearthstone has changed from 2016 to 2022. And let's just take a look at this. There's some fun bits and pieces in it. For example, these bits about the development of the Discover mechanic. In your initial discussions, you were talking about where the card you chose would go. Would it go to the top of your deck? Would it be shuffled in the deck? Would it go into your hand? We decided mostly just through playtesting. We tried putting it on top of your deck or shuffling it into your deck. Turns out that putting it on top of your deck was a real problem, in combination with anything that dealt with the ordering of the cards in your deck. So many of the cards shuffled your deck, Forgotten Torch shuffles a Roaring Torch into your deck, that wrote any kind of treasure that went to the top of your deck. That's funny when you think about dredge mechanic. More about that in a moment, because Ben Brode had more to say. Also, it took away the surprise of drawing the card on your turn with such a huge moment for Hearthstone. You can't do anything on your opponent's turn. Yeah, that's what makes Hearthstone so fast, because there's no interaction during the opponent's turn, so people can play quickly, but that also is sometimes a limit. But we could actually give you your turn draw at the end of your turn. It might actually speed up the game. Well, it doesn't really need to be sped up even more from this, because you could be planning your turn out on your opponent's turn. We tried this out way back during the initial development of Hearthstone, as we were trying to do things to speed up gameplay, and it just makes you feel so hopeless because you knew next turn you weren't going to have an answer to the stuff your opponent was doing. Whereas now you have hope throughout your entire opponent's turn that you might draw that AoE or that big kill spell, something to save you from this bad position. It takes all the drama and excitement out of that draw, so putting these on top of the deck just didn't work. That was Hearthstone in 2016. But in 2022, Hearthstone is different because we have the dredge mechanic, which allows you to see the bottom 3 cards of your deck, choose one, put that on the top of your deck. Okay, well, first of all, many of the most successful dredge cards actually do draw that card immediately. Aquatic Form, Gun Fishing, Trench Surveyor, Leviathan. You just dredge, you put it on top, and then you just draw it immediately from there. And that seems to be quite an important feature in making dredge successful. Although there are also exceptions, cards like Seafloor Savior, Battlecry Dredge. If it's a minion, give it this minion's attack and health, and that card is actually going to stay on top of the deck. Now comparing this to the design philosophy in 2016, where actually knowing what's on top of your deck takes away excitement. And also, I could add, knowing what's in the bottom of your deck also takes away excitement, because once you have dredged once, you're going to know the remaining 2 bottom cards in your deck. If the card that you would really need, you're hoping to draw that card, happens to be one of those, then you know all along that it's not going to be possible to get it. So quite a few things have changed here. And this interview just keeps giving. Here's Dean Ayala, XR, current game director, back then an associate designer, answering a question about, okay, why do you prioritize class cards from discoverers instead of neutral cards? And actually that is a mechanic that was later reversed. Nowadays you can discover cards from your own class and neutral cards, and they all have equal weight. No more advanced weighting for the class cards. But yeah, it was actually pretty late. It's one of the last decisions I think we made. We played a lot of games with Discover, and a lot of them were really cool, and I think the reason behind that is pretty specific actually. One of the really fun parts about Hearthstone for me is when you're starting to learn the game, you learn a lot about what other classes have. So on turn 9, you're worried about Druid playing combo against you. Turn 10, you might be worried about Priest playing mind control. Or turn 8, you might be worried about Tyrion, and so on and so forth. With Discover, when it pulls from the entire card pool, then a lot of our games ended in ways where like Druids would be playing Tyrion on turn 8, just crazy stuff like that. You could never play around it, and it was actually pretty frustrating. Okay, so yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Interesting perspective from XR compared to the current Hearthstone design philosophy, because back then Like they're emphasizing the importance of being able to play around things, emphasizing the importance of knowing what your opponent's capabilities are. And well, the current Hearthstone, I guess you should play around these. Play around that Curter's Demon Render on 6. Play around that Harpoon Gun on 3, drawing a big beast that's going to be played against you on 4. Play around all of those random dragons from Lady Prestor. Why don't you play around that Defended Warring District? Actually, you can to an extent, you just don't play any minions. But in order for that to work, you have to play a very specific kind of deck that can afford to not play any minions. Because that would then reduce the amount of targets the hunter has, and then that would delay the quest line. Although nowadays quest hunter also plays enough minions so that they can just shoot their own, so actually you're just not doing much of anything even if you do that. Or you could try to play around that Mega Shark that's been discounted, it's coming with 6 other fellow mechs. Well, yeah, you can put a lot of stats on the board and hope that they hit those instead of your face. But yeah, huge emphasis back in 2016. Know what your opponent can do. Play around what your opponent can do. And nowadays, that's just playing around. The concept of playing around stuff is just pretty dead in Hearthstone. You try to do your broken thing before your opponent does their broken thing, instead of just trying to like play around things. So quite a big shift in design direction there. And from a broad game design state of Hearthstone perspective, what made discover the right keyword for this set at this point in time? When Brode answered, as the game continues to grow, we feel a little bit more open to adding new keywords to the game. When the game was brand new, we really wanted to keep ourselves in check as far as the number of keywords we added and how quickly we added them, so there weren't any new keywords in Naxxramas, for example. But now, if there's an awesome keyword we're excited about, we explore it, and we think about putting it in there. We're so excited about the Discover mechanic, it felt like a really cool way to brand the set, sort of has a mechanical binding theme for it, so that's where we went with that. Okay, so they're open to adding new keywords, except that there are many cases where they use a keyword for an expansion and then they abandon it, and then they use the same mechanic, but then they no longer use the keyword. And sometimes they add a keyword to a mechanic that already existed and didn't really need a keyword, just so that they can add a new keyword in every set. Yeah, looking at the most recent sets and the keywords in those sets, we have, of course, Dredge is the most recent one. We had Honorable Kill. You have to kill a minion with the exact amount of damage. We had Tradable having a huge impact, especially improving the consistency of your deck, just getting those good draws. Pretty major change into how often you can get good draws in Hearthstone. We had Frenzy, where you need to take a little bit of damage, but not kill the minion in a single hit. And in Murder at Castle Natura, we're going to have Infuse, which is just going to be a copy of Bolvar and a copy of Blood Herald, and those were total failures. So we're just adding a keyword for the sake of adding a keyword here. A bit like Recruit was a keyword that just already functioned, but then they just need a keyword for every expansion nowadays. So hey, let's just put it in keyword form here. Overall, over the past few expansions, Infuse is the least interesting keyword we have had in more than a year. It's just a copy of that Bolvar mechanic. Dredge is probably the second least interesting keyword we have had in a long time. It also goes against many of those principles that Ben Brode talked about back in 2016. Obviously, the Hearthstone team can also have learned, and we have come to the conclusion that, okay, some of the principles they had in 2016 were actually wrong, and they could do better. And in many ways, yes, they can. For example, the scheduling of balance changes has improved a lot over the years, but still there are some fundamental design principles where I'm not sure if the game has actually made any progress, or if it has more like regressed. And about that Tradable, and about that Dredge, and about that card draw, Ben Brode, 2016. Yeah, I mean, we have cards that draw you cards, but traditionally those have actually been a little bit dangerous for us. It enables you to set up combinations of cards that are fine when they're at a certain level of consistency, but if you become too consistent, maybe those are a little bit dangerous. And also the game, I think, gets less fun when every game feels sort of the same. Card draw means you see more of your deck each game, so the games start feeling more similar. Have you ever felt that the games feel more of the same? Like Curter's Demon Renders coming, Harpoon Guns coming, Lady Prestor with those 4 tutors in the deck that tutor for that Lady Prestor, Any questline like Defend the Dwarven District that is guaranteed to start in your opening hand, all those Mega Sharks. Yeah, the games may indeed feel a little bit of the same. And looking back at an interview with the developers 6 years ago really showcases how fundamentally Hearthstone has changed, and how all of those principles that the developers were talking about 6 years ago simply do not apply to the current game anymore. Maybe it's for the better, maybe it's for the worse. Well, you be the judge. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please click the like button, subscribe to my channel, and check out my Twitch channel.